All right, so we're all right here. I'd like you to come in and type in File, New, Project. We've done this before. This is going to be a Windows Form app, so you want to choose the second one that you have right there. And we're actually going to do one from right out of the book. And they want us to call this Inches to Centimeters GUI. All right? Inches to Centimeters GUI. Hopefully you can read that. Okay, I can't make that any bigger. Save it where you've been saving this stuff. I imagine this is going to take upwards of a half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe less. All right? But my hope is no later than 10, and then you'll again have almost 2 hours of lab time today. Again, I can't say this too many times. Tomorrow is the hands-on test. Hands-on tests, if you've never taken one before, they're open book, they're open notes. As the saying goes, they're closed neighbor. All right? So I'm going to start this. And just because I don't need it to be that big, I'm going to really shrink this down and only use about the size that I need. Again, make it whatever size you want to make it, but I'm going to make the size like that. All right, again, you make it whatever size you want to make it. Again, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the name of this form. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to call it Form Inches to Centimeters GUI. And again, what you call it isn't that important. However, you really shouldn't call it Form 1. All right? And remember that when you are creating it and you are giving it a name, you cannot have any blank spaces in the name. You cannot have any special characters in the name other than it may take underscores and or hyphens. I don't remember if it takes one or both of those. All right? So this is where I am. I hate that color. I've said this to you before. So I'm going to go over to the back color, change it to a custom color. I'll just use green. You can make it anything you want, or you can leave it. Really and truly does not matter. You want to turn yours in and you want that gray background all the time, then go for it. All right? So the first thing, again, that we're going to do is we're going to build the interface, get the interface to the way we want it, lock the controls in, then we'll add the code. All right? Now, if you look up on the screen, please, because when we worked on this yesterday, the only thing that we added for our interface, the only thing we added were 5 buttons. Today we're going to have 3 buttons. We're going to have a calculate button, a clear button, and an exit button. But we're also going to have 2 labels, and we're going to have 2 text boxes. All right, so our interface, I'm just going to draw it as though I'm creating it right now. We're going to have a label here that will say inches, a label here that will say centimeters, a text box here, a text box here. We're going to have a button here that says calculate, a button here that says clear, and a button here that says exit. Now, a couple more things about this. Okay, we already did this program and we did it, but when we did it as a console app. We did it as a console app both interactively, where we asked the user for a value, and non-interactively. But if you remember, the idea was if we put a 3 here and click calculate, it should come up and say 7.62 there. Does that make sense to everyone as far as the way we're setting up the interface? Now, a couple things we're going to do. We're going to take that text box and we're going to make it read only. Why? Why are we doing that? Pardon? Because it's an output. Again, just like in your calculator, if you type in 1 plus 3 and you hit the equal sign, you get 4. You can't change that answer. I don't think 1 plus 3 should be 4. It should be 7. Well, tough. It's the same kind of thing right here. All right, I'm going to go and do a bunch of the stuff that I did yesterday. setting tab order, setting the accept button, setting the cancel button, etc. Just so you get used to doing that. All right? One thing you have to realize is when you update your portfolio at the end of the semester, I know you two don't know about portfolios, but we'll be talking about them some more in the future. But when you update your portfolio, you're going to have probably executable copies of your programs in there. All of them, whichever ones you're most proud of or whatever. You want these to look and act and react as professionally as possible. There may be somebody, some goofball out there that might give you a job now or in the future that's going to tab through to see if you've got the tab orders set, etc. Now, can I mandate that you guys do that? Can I say, you know what, I'm going to take off if you don't have the tab orders? Yeah, I can do that. I don't want to do that. What I'm doing is I'm trying to show you best practices. So when we're doing programs in class, we're following best practices. So I expect you to do best practices. All right? So I've got this. The next thing that I'm going to do in here before I even build the interface is I'm going to come down in my form here. I'm going to come down to where it's got the text. And again, that form 1 is kind of silly. So what this is this is Chapter 2, Exercise 1, which is on page 130. So that's basically what I'm going to put in here. So I'll change that form 1 to my name. So Jeff Scott hyphen Chapter 2 exercise, or how about this? Chapter 2, page 130, exercise, just EX is fine, 1. So now when I look at it up on the screen there, you can see all that stuff. All right, maybe not that easily, but mine says Jeff Scott hyphen Chapter 2 space page space 130 space EX period 1. It's nice to do that because then people know exactly, or especially your instructor, which one I'm grading. You can say, well, won't you know it anyway? Yeah. But again, this is just adding a little bit of internal documentation. If you wanted to put the name of the program in there, so if you wanted to put in inches to centimeters GUI, you could put that in too. All right? So I'm going to leave this up here for just a minute where I've got all this stuff. But I'm going to come over to where it's got label, and the label is a quirky control. So I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to grab one and just drag it there and grab another one and drag it. Don't worry about changing its size because as of right now, you can't. I'm going to show you how to change the size in just a minute. So you can see where my labels are. They're kind of right over where it is on the board there. There's a label here and a label here. I'm going to come in then and grab a couple text boxes, put one here, grab another one, and put it there. Again, I can move these around, and eventually I will move these around. Okay? Then I want my 3 buttons. So there's one. There's one. And there's one. Whoop. Now you can see they're not exactly the same as my interface, but hopefully you realize it looks now a lot like the interface looks when I hand drew it. Everybody with me? All right. I'm not going to sit there every time and hand draw the interface on the board. After a while, you'll just be like, this is just a waste. What are you doing that for? But there's my interface right now. Again, I mentioned this to you yesterday. First thing you do is you come in and the first thing I did was I set up my form. So I named my form. I set the text for my form. All right? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out the controls that I want. The next thing that I'm going to do, even before I resize any control, is I'm going to come in and I'm going to name each one of these controls. All right? Now, if you don't like the naming convention that I use and you want to use a different one, I really don't have a problem with it. I mentioned this the other day. Microsoft, I'm going to call this one right here, is going to be called literally label inches. And this one will be label centimeters, etc. The old way that people used to do it is they'd say LBL for label inches. If you like that way better, do it that way. But be consistent in the way you set up your naming structure. If you can, be consistent in virtually everything that you do. All right? So again, what I'm about to do right here, just so you see this, I'm going to draw them off on the side here. This one right here, this will be, mine is going to be called label inches. Inches. And then the text box will be called text box inches. This one will be label centimeters. And the text box will be called text box centimeters. It is by no means mandatory that you put the same name like inches or centimeters in both your labels and your text boxes. I do it because, again, to me, you're showing the linkage between them. And then for the three buttons, looking on the bottom here, the first one will be called button clear, and it will say clear. The second one will be first one is button calculate, second one is button clear, and the third one will be button exit. All right, this I'm going to change to inches, this I'm going to change to centimeters, this I'm going to change to calculate, this I'm going to change to clear, and this I'm going to change to exit. Does that all make sense to everyone? All right, I like to have a natural order and a natural naming order, etc. when I set this stuff up. All right, so let me remove this stuff that's on here so we can just start coming in and changing the interface. Remember, always strive to change the names of your controls before you double click on them to put code in. All right? That said, please look on the screen, everyone. I don't care if you're typing, just stop for a second. Labels I mentioned are special. They're special for a lot of reasons. 2 or 3 of the reasons right now. One is labels cannot get what's called the focus, which means when the program's running, you cannot click on a label. You just can't. They're not set up like that. All right? So typically when you're figuring out the tab order, technically you don't even have to set them for labels. I do, but you can't tab to them anyway. Second, again, if you look on here, right now where it says label 1 and label 2, I can't change the size the way this currently is. I cannot change the size. I want to change the size of both of them. I want to make them bigger. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lasso this and move this over just a bit. Now I'm going to lasso both of my labels. Everybody hear me? I just lassoed. I just grabbed both of the labels. And to me, this is one of the reasons I don't like Microsoft. Because in many ways, I consider Microsoft to be a non-intuitive company. All right? Why do I say that? Well, notice here, there's a property right now that's called auto size. I want to be able to auto size those. So when you want to be able to auto size, you have to set auto size to false. To me, it should be set to false by default, and you should set it to true to be able to automatically size it. All right? But that's not the way it is. So with both of these lassoed like this, if I come in and I double click on the auto size property, it changes it from true to false. Now I can come in here and I can change the size of these. All right? Now you can change the size. So you either lasso and do them both at once, or you can do them one at a time. That's your call. I could care less. I could never tell anyway how you're doing it. All right? So I now have these. While they're still lassoed, I want to do one other thing. I'm going to stretch it out, make it a little bit wider so it looks like that. I'm going to actually do 2 other things. First of all, sometimes, and if you like this, I don't like to keep the background color right there the same color as my form's background color. Maybe you do. Then leave it. But if you look up on the screen with both of these highlighted, I'm going to do a few things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the back color, and I'm going to change it so that it's one shade darker than the background color of my form. You don't have to do that. I'm doing it because I find that easier. I always do that with my labels. It's just a habit that I've come into. The next thing, I don't like the size of that writing. Can you see the writing up there? I don't think it's big enough. So with both of these still highlighted, I'm going to go down to my properties window and find font. And notice right now it's set to a sans serif 8.25 point font. I'm going to click on that, and when I do, I get the ellipsis window, the 3 dots. So I'm going to click on the 3 dots. And this should look familiar to you from other packages. I'm going to change mine to 12, my size to 12 point, and I'm going to bold it. If you like the sans serif font, keep it. If you'd rather have it Arial or something else, you can change it then. All right, that's enough for me, bold and 12 point. And I'm going to click OK. You can already see how different it looks. See that? All right. The other thing that I'm going to do is I don't like where those are located right now. What I mean is they're both highlighted, and look on the screen, please. I'm going to go down to where it says text align, which is right under text. I'm going to click there. This is, again, as far as I'm concerned, Microsoft being non-intuitive. If I click the down arrow, it shows me a picture. And I want it centered on the right, so I've got to pick that one right there. That's top left. That's center left, that's bottom left, that's center left, etc. You can kind of tell if you choose them. All right? But I'm going to change mine over to the middle one, right there. Now you might say, well, yeah, but this is way too big. Well, I also want to change the wordage in there, don't I? I want to change this one to inches, this one to centimeters. I'm not going to do that yet. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and do the exact same thing I just did right there to my text boxes. So I highlighted both text boxes. I'm going to come in here, and again, I'm going to come in to the font, and I'm going to change it to bold and 12 point. And you'll notice, please look on the screen here. When I do this, see the size of the text box? Notice when I click OK. Did you notice it automatically resized a little bit? If I wanted it to be bigger than that, I could stretch on it here too. For right now, it's fine. All right? Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to name my components. So first I'm going to click on my label, my first label that's there, and I'm going to change its name from label 1 to label inches with a capital I. So I've got label inches. Then I'm going to move over to the text box that's right next to it, and I'm going to change the name of that to text box inches with a capital I. Then I'm going to come over to the one down below here, and I'm going to change the name of this one to label centimeters with a capital C, and the name of this one to text box centimeters with a capital C. While I'm at it, I'm going to go back here, and the order in which you do these doesn't matter, but I'm going to change the text for the first one from label 1 to the word inches with a colon after it. For the second one, I'm going to change it to centimeters with a colon after it. Now, it's starting to take shape. To me, in my humble opinion, it's starting to look a lot more professional than it did when we started to create it. All right? All right. I'm moving my buttons just a little bit so they look a little better under there, and I can actually shrink this size down. That doesn't look great, but it doesn't look terrible. All right? So I'm going to go into my first button, and I want to do two things. Change the name to button calculate, and change the text to calculate. Then go to the second button, and I'm going to change the name of it to button clear, and I'm going to change the text on it to clear. Then I'm going to my third button, and I'm changing the name of it to button exit, and I'm changing the text on it to exit. All right. Now, as far as I can tell, my interface is done. Before I go and lasso all of it and lock the controls, which I'm going to do, please look up on the screen. I did not show you this yesterday. I'm going to click literally, see up here where it says form inches? I'm going to click that down arrow that's right there. That arrow. Not the X there, but that arrow. And notice when I do that, what happens? It shows me a list of all of my controls. I can click on any one of those. That's one way of jumping to it. But the reason I'm showing you this, I didn't do this yesterday. All right? I didn't do this yesterday. I realize that. But it shows you, I can look at here now and I see I've got 3 buttons. They're all named. I've got 2 labels. They're both named. I've got 2 text boxes. They're both named. So I can look at that and know that indeed I have named everything before I come through here and start entering some code. Does that make sense? All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go lasso everything that I've got in here. Remember, lasso means hold down on the left mouse button and drag so everything is highlighted. You'll know that everything is highlighted in 2 ways. If you look on the screen, you'll notice the little dotted thing all the way around it, and when I let go, everything, well, at least on my screen, I guess there we go. You can see from there. Now I want to lock all my controls because I don't want them to move anymore, so I'm going to right mouse click on any control and choose lock controls. If I have to move them, I just reverse the process because it's a toggle. So if I decided, ooh, that one button's a little bit off kilter, I could move it. All right, just highlight it, right mouse click on it, and choose lock controls. This is not by any means a perfect looking interface, but it will work. All right. Now, a couple more things. I'm going to click off of here so I don't have that anymore. I'm going to do the things I showed you yesterday, such as I'm going to click up on View, and I'm going to go down about 3/4 of the way to Tab Order. All right. Now, you might think, when you look on the screen here, if I set the tab order here, 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 that one is not going, this one will be able to get the tab order, but I'm going to make this one read only in just a minute. I'm going to set the tab order like this. That'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, it really doesn't matter about setting the tab order for labels, but you should never have 2 controls that have the same number in there. All right? Why take a chance on ever screwing up where the system doesn't know what it is you want? So I'm going to come through here again. First click on the inches text box. That changes the number to 0. Then on my calculate button. Then on my clear button. Then on my exit button. Then on my centimeters text box. Then on my inches label. Then on my centimeters label. So I've reset the numbers as you can see on the screen. All right? Remember, that sets the tab order, but the numbers stay there until I do another View tab order. Now my tab order is done. All right? 2 more things I want to do, and then I'm ready to write code. The first thing that I want to do is I want to come in and I'm going to set my accept button and my cancel button. So I click on a blank spot on the form so it says form, the name of the form up here. I go up to the top and I find accept button, which is very close to the top, right under the name. I click there, and under the down arrow, I'm going to choose button calculate. All right, button calculate. So that's what I just set. Then I'm going to go down to cancel button, and I'm going to click there, and I'm going to set that one to button clear. All right. Finally, the last thing that I want to do is I'm going to go down to the bottom of my properties window, and I'm going to set the start position, which right now is at Windows default location. I'm going to set that to center screen. All right. Not a bad time to come in here now and do a save all. Either a file save all, or click your double disk icon, or I think it's Control Shift S or something like that. I don't know. Now, if you look on the screen, if I run this, that's what it looks like right now. And you'll notice, if you look up on the screen, everybody please, you see where the cursor's flashing? It's flashing there because I set the tab order to 0 for that control, which is kind of nice. It means when the program starts, boom, that's where it is, which is what I'd want. Now, right now, none of these buttons are operational, so if I want to stop the program, and you can always do this, you just click the X. Notice that when I put my mouse over it, it turns red. If I click the X, boom. Now that's done. Now, I'm asking this question. Are there any questions on anything I've gone over thus far? Anything? All right. Then the next thing to do is to start to think, where am I going to want to put code? Again, you'll virtually never want to put code here or here. It really doesn't make any sense. All right. You may want to put some code here. You may want to put some code here. You'll almost always want to put code in these three. And one more thing I forgot to tell you. I'm going to click on my centimeters text box there. I'm going to go down into my properties window and I'm going to find read only, which is set to false by default, and I'm going to set it to true. It makes it a grayish color. If you don't like that color, you can always go back to your back color and change it to something else. I'm just going to leave it the way that it is. All right? So, in this program, the only places that I want to put code are in my three buttons. So I want to put code here. All right. I want to put code here. And I want to put code here. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Then start thinking, and I'm not trying to be mean, funny, or whatever. Start thinking like a programmer. Okay? There's three things I want to have happen. I'm going to put my clear button in first because there's only 3 lines of code. What 3 things do I want to have happen when I click clear? Anybody? Clear both text boxes and put the focus on the first text box. Very good. That's what I want to do. Okay? So I'm going to double click my clear button and I'm going to do that. So the first text box is called text box inches, and you'll notice that when I put this in, even though when I did this I had goofiness as far as I put a big O there. This is called IntelliSense. It is possible to turn it off. You probably won't want to. Why? Because right now where I am, if I just hit tab, see how it fills in the rest of it for me? All right. So I've got text box inches, dot, and then it always shows me here what's available to me. As soon as I type in a T, it changes. And what I want to change is the text, which you cannot see. But if I put an E in there, then notice that one of the things that's in there is text. That's what I want to change. So I want to say text box inches dot text equals and set it equal to the empty string. All right. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my text box centimeters. And finally, my text box inches dot focus. All right. That's the whole routine. That's it right there. Again, if you want to be a little anal about it, we can do that. All right. Hopefully, the 3 things now that are happening in there make sense to you. All right. I want to show you one more thing before we go on, and that is this. Just so you're aware of it, I'm trying to bring this stuff up for completeness sake. Whenever I go and blank out or whatever you want to call it, something like this, I use double quote, double quote. I always do that. But you can, it's a lot more typing, but you can type in here string.empty. You can type that in also. They mean the same thing. I don't know why you do that, because it's more effort and more typing. But you'll at least occasionally will see that in code. I'm going to just leave it the way it was. I'm going to make it double quote, double quote. You know, so if you said, well, is there any advantage to making it string.empty? Not that I know. All right. So I'm going to again click my double disk icon, and I'm going to run the program again. And you'll notice now I can't click in I can click in this box, but I can't do anything in here because it's read only. All right. So if I click and put anything in here and I click clear, I know that works. Okay. I won't know whether or not it'll actually clear out that answer until I write my calculate routine. Does that make sense? All right. So we've written, for lack of better words, basically 1/3 of our code so far. All right. So I'm going to click this red X again, or this X, make it red, click it again. And the next thing I'm going to write is my exit routine, which, guess what, is exactly the same, exactly as what we wrote yesterday. Okay. So that's the whole thing right there. A little bigger so you can see it all. And again, I want to say this one more time. This is going to create this. It's going to create a box. The icon for information will have a circle over here, kind of a fancy little eye on there. That right there is this. It'll have two buttons on the bottom. Yes. No. Those two buttons that are right there, that is this. It'll have a title that says exit program, if I can spell, exit program, question mark, question mark, question mark. That right there is this. And then it'll have some text over here that says exit the program now. That probably should have been a question mark instead of an exclamation point. But that right there is this. Does that make sense to everyone? If you don't like my verbiage, you can put your own in there, but it should be professional. All right, it should be professional, and it should symbolize what it is you're trying to do. If you write a program like this for the lowest common denominator, in other words, for someone with little to no computer experience, they should be able to understand everything that you're trying to do right here. All right, I'll come right back to it, but let's save this and run it again and click exit. All right, so again, what you see up on the screen, it'll take, there it is. So again, there we got it. There's the icon, there's the title, there's the text, there's the buttons. All right? It's inside of an if statement, and in the if statement it says if you click yes, exit the application. And if you click no, don't do anything. All right? Does all that make sense? And I'm asking, I mean, to me, no questions out of bounds here. If something doesn't make sense to you, I'd much rather have you ask it now. All right. A lot of times what happens is everybody, you say, well, I know this is a dumb question, but, and what you find out a lot of times is a lot of people say that other people have the same question. All right. Again, I'm trying to do this in what I consider to be as intuitive a way as possible. All right. Yes, sir. Okay. When we do the calculate, which we're going to do next, that's what's left, I'm going to introduce something to you that's really not introduced in the book until about Chapter 5. I'm going to explain what's happening in there, but if you don't understand it, don't use it. All right? You will understand it when we get to that point. In fact, I think it's even later than Chapter 5. So why am I introducing it now? Because what that'll do is that'll make sure that if we put in a non-numeric value for inches, if we either leave it blank or put a non-numeric value, our program will not blow up. That makes sense? What we are trying to do is literally what most programmers refer to as we're trying to idiot-proof the program. All right? So again, we've got 2/3 done as far as our button stuff that's in here. What we don't have done yet is the calculate, okay, which is up here. So I'm going to write the calculate part now. Before I do, if you look up on the screen here, because this is the way these programs are set up, all right, you've got a bunch of using statements. Again, if you look up on the screen, the using statements on line 2 through 8 are all gray, which means they're not being used. The ones on 1 and 9 are blackened, which means they are being used. If you want to remove the ones in line 2 through 8, you can. If you want to leave them there, you can. Either way is fine. I'm going to just leave them there. This is our namespace, and your namespace should always have the same name as whatever you save the program as. Remember, a namespace is kind of like a folder. It's kind of like a collection of similar things. Then, and this may be a little bit confusing, all right, but I'm just trying to explain what's in here. It says public, all right, and again, I think I've given this analogy before. I don't know if I have for you guys or not, all right, but, okay, what I'm about to tell you, I realize this isn't very practical. I think everybody would agree, that probably the most prominent public figure in this country is our president, okay? Again, you may or may not agree with that, but I mean, let's put it this way. He's right up there. And he's a public figure. So even though the Secret Service wouldn't allow me to do this, technically, he works for me, so I should be able to drive to Washington, knock on the White House door and say, hey, I'd like to have lunch with the president. I know that's not how it works. But the point is, the reason I'm telling you this is when something is public, it's available to everyone. All right? It's called an access modifier, so you know that. Then the next thing, and that's a little confusing, it's got the same name as our form, and it says partial class. It's kind of confusing. Well, if we didn't have this here, it would just say class. We've already talked about what a class is, and a class is a blueprint from which you make objects. All right? So what about partial? It's possible when you build a program to combine different classes together. So right now, this is just a partial class. But we could have other partial classes that we use to combine to make this program. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that all semester. But I just want you to know that word exists. All right? Then this is the name of our form right there. Form, inches to centimeters. All right? And this right there, that means inherits from. So what this means is our form inherits from a class that's called form. That means we automatically get everything that's been defined in that form class. That's what it means. All right, I don't expect that to totally make sense to you right now. But when we get into chapters 9 and 10 and we talk object-oriented programming, we'll probably go back and revisit that again. All right? Then, we've got this. And notice this right here is the same name as our class name. Would everybody agree with that? That name right there is exactly the same as this name. What this thing is actually called right here, that line, it's called a constructor. And what that means is when we run the program and if we ever try to create an object, call this routine. And all this routine does basically with initialize component is that routine sets up the screen for us. All right? Then we've got our other stuff that's in here. Let's just grab one of these. The opposite of public is private. So these things here that you see that are private, they're only available inside of this program. If I had another program, they couldn't work with them because they're private. So I've got the word private followed by the word void. Void is the return type. And that means that this particular routine returns nothing. It is void of a return. All right? Then we've got the name of the control. Remember we called our first one button calculate? Everybody remember that? So that's the name of the control. Then we've got underscore click. That's the event that we want our button to respond to. That says when we click it, this is the code we want to have run. Then we've got our parameters, which are inside of our parentheses here. The first parameter is the sender. For lack of better words, that's usually you. You click the button. The second parameter isn't used that often, event args. But imagine, Mr. Groves has talked about his affinity for games and maybe even creating his own. So if he was creating his own game and he wanted to take something and manipulate it around on the screen, he might use mouse position, X and Y coordinates. That's what event arguments are. There are things that certain routines require. The click routine doesn't require anything. All right? And we're going to refer to any arguments that are used, we'll refer to them as E. E for event args. I mean, you could call it Bob. It wouldn't matter. All right? Every single routine that we create is inside of curly braces. Each one of those sets of curly braces makes what's called a block. All right? So what I'm going to do is outside of everything, I don't want it in here. I don't want it anyplace. I'm going to put it right here. Remember we had that constant? So I'm going to say declare and initialize, you can do this, program constant. And there'll just be one of them. You may or may not remember it, but it was const double centimeters in an inch and it's equal to 2.54. All right? Again, it would have been okay to actually put it in here. Most programmers take whatever constants they declare and they declare them up at the top of the program. Again, it is not mandatory that you do that, but it is what most programmers tend to do. It's become a convention, a standard pretty much over the years. All right? So I've got that. Okay? The next thing I want to do is I want to start putting in my code now in here. All right? You know this already, but if you look on the screen, I basically got two things in here. One's an input, and as Christian said, one's an output. So my input is inches, my output is centimeters. I could do a lot of this work without creating any variables. Just like we kind of stuffed that read line yesterday right inside of our convert statement. I don't know if that's good coding or bad coding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here is I'm going to declare and initialize. These are called local variables. When a variable is local, it has been defined inside of a method. So it's inside of something that's in curly braces. This one wasn't. That constant was global. I could even say here, global, if I wanted to. You can, but you don't have to. Program constant. But this is going to be, these are local variables. There will be two of them. They'll both be doubles. And without trying to sound whatever, funny or whatever, hopefully you all agree. Hopefully you all agree. Looking at those, they're pretty self-documenting. All right? They're much more self-documenting as opposed to if I had just called them I and C. Okay? If I call them I and C, I don't like that. All right? So, what I'm going to show you here is the way I wrote this. Is it perfect? I'm sure it's not. Everybody hear me? I'm sure it's not. All right? So when I get done, if you think, you really should have done this, that's good. When you start striking out on your own, that's when you really start to learn. All right? And when you're going through here, if you're like, well, he gave us this, but I want to just kind of see the errors I'm going to get. Go in and do stuff like this. Remove the semicolon. Notice right away you get a thing at the bottom here that says that was expected. So you get an error message and you get a red squiggly. These green squigglies, again, are warnings that are telling us we've declared two variables and we're not using either one of those as of right now. We're going to start in just a minute. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure when I start the program, all right, I want to make sure that what I put in here is a number. That should make sense to you. Now, some programming languages, some have a built-in function or method that's called like isNumeric. This is not one of those languages. So we're going to write our own. The good news is when we write our own, it's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. That's it. And 2 of the lines are curly braces. So you can see how small that'll be. All right? But what I want to do is I only want to, when I click this button, I only want it to start doing the calculation if the value I put in there is a number. Does that make sense? Now, for right now, I'm not worried. You say, well, what? It shouldn't really be a negative number. Yeah, it shouldn't. All right, and that's fine. We won't worry about that for right now. We get into if statements next week, so don't worry about it. So again, I'm going to come in here and start writing the code now. So I'm going to say if isNumeric, you're going to get an error when you put this in. Like I said, you're going to get an error when you put this in. Anybody want to take a wild guess as to why we're getting that error? Anybody? No, well, you're close, but right now there is no routine called isNumeric. We're going to write that in just a second. All right? And the way that so what I'll do is I'll go right underneath, so if you look on the screen here, there's the beginning of my routine, there's the end of my routine. So right underneath this, I'm going to write private void isNumeric, whoops, I don't need that, isNumeric, and it doesn't require any arguments. But do you notice as soon as I do that, oh, I'm sorry, it does require something. It's going to require, I guess it's a string. Now I'll just call it input. All right? But notice now, can you see this? You're like, wow, I'm still getting errors. It's all going to be reconciled in just a matter of minutes. All right? So I'm saying if this is numeric, all right, if it's numeric, then what I'm going to want to do, all right, is my calculation. If it's not numeric, I don't want to do the calculation. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, and if I want this red squiggly to go away, I change this from void to bool. Whoops. Yeah. And you'll notice is numeric. Why am I getting an error now? Because I'm saying it must return true or false. Right now, what am I returning? Not a doggone thing. All right? I'm going to leave this like it is right now. I'm going to write this thing when I'm done writing this. Does that make sense to everybody? Different programmers program in different ways. All right? And I've given you this analogy before, or at least I think I have. It's kind of like, you know, if we were doing a class in here on interpretive art, and I brought in a bowl of fruit the first day of class, and I said, okay, you've got an hour, paint this. You all would see something different in that bowl of fruit. In much the same way, when you start writing your own programs and using your own logic, you all might do it a little different way. But the bottom line is, did you get the right answer? Do you get the right answer whenever you run the program? All right? So I'm going to come back here. And, well, let's think about what I want to do. This says if is numeric. What that means is what I put in here was a number. Does that make sense to everyone? Since it is a number, I want to convert it. Pretty simple conversion, isn't it? I just want to take that number, multiply it by 2.54, and put it in there. That's what the whole program's about. All right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and say inches equals convert dot to double what? My text box inches. This. Make this a little smaller so you can see it. I'm asking this question. All right? You can all look up for a second. The code's not going anywhere. This line of code is only going to run if the if statement was true, which means that line of code will only run if what we put in that text box was a number. So I can convert it like this and know that it's going to have to work because I've already checked to see whether or not it's numeric. Does that make sense? All right. I mean, that's what programming is all about. So now I've got my inches. Well, now if I want my centimeters, I know that all I have to do is take my inches and multiply it by my centimeters in an inch. All right. So now I've got both of my values. That should make sense to everybody. However, if I run the program right now, if you look on the screen, if I run the program, even if I get rid of that is numeric thing, put a number in there and click calculate, I haven't put the calculation in here. Everybody see where I am? So that's the last thing I have to do as part of the if. So I have to come back in here and I have to say, oops, sorry, text box centimeters dot text equals centimeters. All right? But that's not good enough. I want it to say it equals centimeters dot toString, and I want to make it 2 decimal places. Now, maybe I'm going out to a little bit of an extreme there, but I'm saying that what I want to have happen there is I want it to be formatted for 2 decimal places. Otherwise, sometimes when you do a wrong or a big enough calculation, you might get it to 6 or 7 or 8 decimal places. Now it'll always be to 2. All right. Now I'm going to put a comment here. You don't have to, but I'm going to say numeric value in inches text box. All right, so I know, and that actually it's a check for that. That's what I'm checking right there. If it's true, I'm doing this, but if it's false, I want to do something else. Now, I'm introducing some stuff to you that's not introduced till Chapter 4. And for the two gentlemen here, where this is their first class, it might be a little harder for you two to understand. The rest of you, the other 11 of you in here, you've all gone through if statements last semester. You've written if statements. We did the BMI program, for example, when you did if statements. They work the same way. This right here, just so you know, what's in here, that's referred to as a Boolean condition, which means if it's true, we do what comes after it. If I wouldn't put this in here, if that wasn't in here, if it was true, we do this. If it was false, we do nothing. But we want to do something. Remember, if this else is true, I'm asking you this question. If this else is true, right there, what does it mean about this? What does it mean in there? You should be able to figure this out. Perfect. Thank you, Abby. That you put something in there that was non-numeric. We could choose to do nothing with it. I think that's very amateurish to do that. All right? And guess what? We already know how to use a message box, right? We're going to use a different part of the type of the message box. All right? And what I mean by that is we're going to come out and we're going to write the message box, but we're only going to, in fact, I put in, there's an error on my code, and I'll show it to you when I hand it out to you. But I just noticed it. We only want an OK button there. We want to tell them that there's an error. Then we want to remove whatever was put in there, and we want the focus to go there. Does that all make sense? Not really that much stuff to do, but we're going to do that in just a second. All right, so we're going to put that into our else. And the way we do that is we start by writing a message box. I don't remember how to do it. So I'm going to grab the message box that I had over here. And I only want that much of it. I don't want an if statement. I don't want a yes, I'm not going to want a yes, no, and I'm not going to want to exit the program. So I'm just going to grab that much of it. And if that confused you, you can always type it also. All right, but I'm going to put it right in here. Now, I don't want to say exit the program now. That would be kind of silly. But I want to say blank or non-numeric input. And I'm going to put here for my title, invalid input, please re-enter. All right. I'm going to change this instead of a yes, no. All I want there is a button that says OK. And I don't want that to be information. All right. I want that, is that supposed to be a big K? I don't remember. There it is. I don't want that to say information. I want that to say error. I made an error. All right. That's what I want to have happen. So that box that I drew up here before, to redraw it, now it's going to look like this. The title is going to be invalid input, please re-enter. You know, you can see that. The icon is going to be a red X in there. There's only going to be an OK button, and it's going to say blank or non-numeric input. Does that make sense? All right. Everybody in here, I'm just asking a question. You all know the comedian Ron White. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But his catchphrase is, you can't fix stupid. All right? And the reason I'm saying that is I can let the user know what they're doing wrong. But if they continue to do it wrong, that's their problem. It's not really mine. All right? If they continue to keep putting nothing in there, for example, and running the program, it's going to allow them to do it. It's going to keep giving them an error message, but it's going to allow them to do it. All right? So after I do that, Then what I want to do is I want to go and take what was in that text box, and I want to blank it out, and I want to put, whoops, I want to put the focus there. All right, that's the end of that routine. We have to write is numeric, which again is 5 lines long. So if you give me just a minute, it's going to be real close to 10 o'clock, like I said, but then we'll be finished. All right, I'll leave that up there. If you want to copy that, great. If you don't, this is one of the ones that you will be assigned for Chapter 3. All right. So right now the program's in good shape, except we haven't written this routine right here. Make this a little smaller so I can keep that there. And I'm going to put in these 3 lines. All right. In fact, it's 2 lines. I'm going to explain them after I put them in, but they probably won't make a lot of sense even after I explain them. Okay? All right? And that's the whole rest of the program. I'll give you a second to key that in. Make sure you save it. You can try running your own if you want. I'll try running mine. Then I'll come back and I'll explain these 2 lines of code. There's nothing on your test tomorrow where you'll need to do an if statement like this. I would never, ever test you on something we haven't gone over the chapter on yet. So everything for the chapter tomorrow will be in chapters 1 and 2. You will not have any hands-on tests next week. All right? The Tuesday that we come back, you'll be off a week from Monday. It's Martin Luther King Day. So the 22nd will be your next hands-on test. That will be on chapters 3, 4, and 5. Now, any material that's in 1 and 2, you should still know and be able to use. All right? So I'm going to save this. I'll come right back to the code, but I'm going to run the program. First thing I'm going to try to do is break it. So I'm going to put nothing in there, and I'm going to click Calculate. So notice what I get. Invalid input, please re-enter. That means that it's an error. Blank or non-numeric input, and I only have an OK there. I don't have a yes, no. I told you something. We'll deal with it. That's what the OK is saying. There shouldn't be a yes, no there. Doesn't make sense. All right. So I do that. I run it again. I put some garbage in there. I get the same thing. Once I get the same thing, and notice when I click, it cleared it out and it put the cursor there. Yes. For the question was right here, this test, okay? And the answer is it really doesn't matter. Did it break? No, well, let's try it. And then I will say you're totally correct. All right, it didn't break. Okay, you're right, you couldn't. So let's try changing that. All right, let's try changing that to where we've got this. Let's make this a double test. Okay. Now it doesn't like this though. Double test. Argument 2 cannot convert. Yeah, see, the out expects that is going to be when you put this in here in a try parse, it expects that thing is an int. So no, a return is a Boolean. Ah, you're right. Double dot try parse. Okay, very good. Thank you. Now let's try it with a 3.5 and see if it works. Did it work after you did that? Yes, it does. Okay, thank you. So there are some errors in the code that I'm going to give you. All right, as Christian very, very well pointed out, make this a double, not an int, and make that double dot triparse. All right. The way around that is to only allow whole numbers. All right. I mean, do you want to be able to, with inches, is it okay to say 1 or 2 inches, or do you want to allow 1 3/4 inches? You probably do. All right. So he's right, I'm wrong. Now, let's just take a minute to explain what's going on here. And again, it may not make any sense to you. When we get to a much later chapter, we talk about a built-in routine in C# called triparse. Triparse means try to do a conversion. We had that convert.toInt, convert.toDouble. That means try to do it. If you can do it, it's going to return true. If you cannot do it, it's going to return false. Does that make sense? So you're trying to convert it. You're trying to check to make sure it's a number. If it is 1, you're saying true. You return true, which means that the if was true. So you do this. If you put it blank or something non-numeric, this will, down here, will end up returning false. So you will execute that code. All right? So let me give you all a hard copy of this. Let's talk real quick about the numbers in here that are wrong, or the line numbers, etc., in here that are wrong. Have you fix them? But I'm going to do this, maybe not for every chapter, but especially as we're starting here on a lot of the chapters, where we're going to go through a problem like this as a class. All right? So if you're like, well, I get this already, I don't know why we're doing it, then tune me up. All right? But my guess is there's at least some people in here that as we go into the new chapters and we talk about new stuff, aren't going to have the best of understanding. When is it? I think it's in February. We could talk about that during the break. All right? Okay. If you look on your handout that I just gave you, turn it over on line 56. Line 56, instead of int test, make that a double. All right, so turn the page over that I gave you, cross out the int, and make that a double. On line 57, make that return double dot parse. So one more time, line 56 should say double test with a little d, all lowercase. Line 57 should say return double, all lowercase, dot triparse. Now, I don't remember if there were any other errors in here or not. Notice I put a prologue in here at the beginning. All right. Again, you're not required to do that, but it is considered good programming practice. And I have people say, well, I can't write. All I did was copy out what was in the book. All right. Now, I've got the advantage that I've got it in more or less a PDF format, and you don't. Sorry about that. So you'd have a little bit you'd have to type in. So take a look at this. Try to make sure you get it to work for yourselves. If you have questions on anything, please ask. All right. With that said, you feel free to take a break. The rest of the period is yours.